morning. So, welcome to the Special Agent Podcast. And Jody and I have a guest with us today. Let's start. Jody, you want to introduce yourself in case this is anybody's first episode?
I would love to. Good morning, Robin. I'm
Good
Jody.
morning.
I'm not very awake yet this morning. I'm Jody Drake. I'm with Pratt County K-State Research and Extension Office. I am the Family and Consumer Science and 4-H agent in Pratt County. And we are delighted to welcome a guest this morning because, again, like I said, I'm not really awake yet this morning. So it's a good thing we have a guest this morning. Micah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Micah Waggoner, and I live in Barber County. I was in 4-H from the age I could start until I aged out. Started in Barber County. After my parents divorced, I was in Pratt County for about 3 years. And then from there, I was in Cali County until I graduated high school. Now we live back in Barber County, and my kids are in Barber County 4-H, and I am on the Extension Council. So I like to say I am a fourth generation Barber, or my kids are fourth generation Barber County 4-Hers. My grandpa, we were talking this morning, my grandpa was in one of the clubs when they first started. I don't know if he was in the year that they actually established or if he joined a few years later, but somewhere in that beginning time. My grandma helped create the homemakers units in Barber County, and she was in that for 70 years until she passed away. So that's
Yeah,
quite the time.
uh, Velma was a very special woman. She welcomed me to Barber County and was just always so welcoming. I loved her dearly. Yes, but 70 years, doing anything for 70 years, even just living is an achievement, but to be in homemaker units for 70 years is a real achievement. And we talked a little bit about homemaker units in our last episode. So, if anybody's wondering about those, you could go back and catch up there. Um, and I'm Robin Eubank Callis. I'm the K-State Research and Extension Agent in Barber County. And I'm so glad that Micah hit on the fourth generation of 4-Hers in Barber County because we are celebrating our 90 years of 4-H and wanting to highlight some of that, but talk about so much more today. So, Jody,
It, it sounds like Micah bleeds green a little bit. I kind of love that.
And purple. I should have worn my K-State, but
Oh, hey, that's okay. That's quite all right.
yes.
yes.
We we actually invited you on this morning to talk about another passion of yours, which is homesteading, right?
Yes. My
Yeah.
grandma that we spoke about, she really kind of, I feel like, instilled that in me. I grew up with working alongside my dad, my uncle, my brother, and on the flip side, my stepdad, my brothers, kind of in a man's world, which I enjoyed greatly. And I have a strong passion for cattle. We raise cattle. We also farm. I kind of side on the cattle side of things, and I was actually checking heifers until we started this right now. But also keeping some of that kind of traditional homemaker value in there, even though I spent a lot of my time not learning those things necessarily. I did learn quite a bit from my grandma, sewing, cooking, things like that. Those were all very important to her, and she was a housewife for her whole life. She took care of my grandpa until he passed away, and then when he was in his like kind of final days and times, he always said, she's taking care of me for the whole time. He said, she really worked hard to take care of me. And so that was always something that was special to me. And looking back at those homemaker roles, we talked about being a 1925 housewife in a 2025 world. Now, when I talk about my grandma, she was born in 28. So she was really more in that 45 year range. But we like to say 2025 because, that's 100 years ago. But, in those days, a lot of those wives were homemakers. That was their job, which, is vastly
That's a hard
different.
job 100
Yeah.
years
And it's
ago.
vastly
Yeah,
different than I feel like today.
yeah.
Back then, career opportunities were access to
Mhm.
those career opportunities were very limited back then.
Yep.
And those were their career opportunities, and that was their career. Um, and a lot of that day in the life was breakfast, cleaning, taking care of the kids, cleaning, doing the housework, managing the farm chores, which is something that, I try to do. Now, am I as good as they were or my grandmother? Absolutely not. I think today's world looks a lot different, than it did then. And some of the things that I feel like help to try to keep those values and keep doing those things in today's world using a modern day. Number one would be grocery pickup. If you've never done a grocery pickup, you haven't lived. That is the greatest thing I have ever done. I can sit on my computer and shop for my groceries and then go get them, and they're just ready. It's
There's no
incredible.
shame in that. So
Um,
tell us about some of the livestock and crops on your farm.
yeah, we crop wise, I feel like we plant about everything. We've got wheat, corn, beans, cotton, um, you name it, we probably grow it or have grown it. Um, Cattle stuff, we have cows, cow calf pairs. We're calving out right now, kind of on the tail end. We also run stocker cattle. So we sold those actually yesterday. And as far as farm chores, like around my house, we have, all of the things, the show animals. We have the cattle and we have the lambs, and we also have chickens. So we have quite the variety, of those farm
So
things going on.
I give Jody a hard time because I call hers poultry princesses. Are yours poultry princesses?
No. um, I like to refer to my chickens as, this sounds terrible, but slightly neglected. Um, they're not. Don't think of me any differently. They're not neglected. But my husband built me this self feeder, which is incredible. You can put like 3 bags of feed in it, and they can eat it, and it doesn't go bad, and they get through it, and um I will have to admit sometimes it runs out and I don't realize it for maybe a day or two. And there's 20 of them, and they have lived well over a year. So they're okay. They're not super neglected, but I do sometimes forget to feed them when they need it. So, full transparency there. I'm not the best chicken farmer. I do a lot better on the cattle side, and I have a lot more knowledge there, but I do have the chickens also.
So, Jody, tell us a little bit about your poultry princesses.
Well, in comparison, I inherited a chicken palace, for lack of a better term. And it was actually, well, let me tell you a little bit about my farm. It is, it used to belong to a family that I'm related to, uh, the Binger family. Where there were 3 sisters and 1 brother in this family, and none of them ever married. And their mother was a sister to my great grandfather. And so when they all passed away, the house came down to me. And so when I moved in, there was another smaller house on the homestead that they had turned into a chicken house. And their parents actually used to live in this house. And so Florine, one of the sisters, loved her chickens. And she actually had a propane heater that she kept going in that house at one time to keep the chickens warm throughout the winter. It was delightful. I did not keep the propane heater going for the chicken, but so it's got a large room in it where the chickens have a roost. And it's a wonderful roost that you can lift up, and there's a chain, and you can chain it up to the ceiling and then clean out from underneath it. She would clean it every day. Now, I do not clean it every day, but it does get cleaned quite frequently. And it's got some nice nesting boxes in it. So it's rather large. And then there's a separate room where I keep all the feed and stuff. So I do feed them every morning, and they get let out. They have they do have a penned-in yard, but I do also let them free range if I know that they're not going to be bothered by a dog. So right now, my daughter's dog is visiting. Um, so I've got a pretty small little flock right now, and I have 3 geese as well. And they're more for guard geese duties. They kind of keep the chickens safe. So I do baby them quite a bit. I have one little hen. She's the little red hen. She doesn't really have a name, but she'll squat down just so I'll pick her up and love her. So yeah, mine are quite pampered.
Yes.
So
Thinking, sorry, Robin, go ahead.
I was gonna say I love this the differences and the fact that Jody, your family probably homesteaded and built that 2-room house to house
Uh-huh.
a whole family, and
Mhm.
then as you got the big house, which is now
Mhm.
your old farmstead house that
Yeah.
you talk about. Your chickens have the original roost for the family.
Yep. Yep.
All right, so okay, so do we want to dive into our because we do pride ourselves on every podcast has some research information to share. So let's dive into that real quick while we're talking chickens.
We certainly can if you'd like. I was gonna go elsewheres, but if you want to do researchy stuff, we
Well,
can.
I thought that way we could say we did it and then we can go elsewhere and see what
Okay.
else.
All right. So K-State does have quite a bit of information on poultry, actually. And I should have looked up before I started this, but there's a nice publication called The Management of the Small Flock of Chickens, and it was written by Dr. Scott Beyer at K-State. And I actually went to one of his workshops several years ago. He did one on egg grading, um, and it was a great workshop. But it was like so several years ago. But he has some great information. But it's just a basic publication. It talks about different sources to get your hens from or your livestock from. Talks about the different breeds of chickens, what works best. It also gives you a little bit of information about how much space your chickens might need as well. Facilities, talks about equipment, um, talks about different types of feeding practices, types of feed. It really is a very nice, comprehensive publication. I won't go into all the specifics of it, but if you want this publication, we'll put a link to it um, in our comments with the podcast so that you can get it directly from the K-State bookstore. It's still out there. It's a little bit older publication, but it's still very relevant. It talks about egg handling. It talks about the health of your flock. Great, really good information. Another really relevant publication, and this was updated just this year, actually. The most recent one is a 2025 one. It's about selling eggs at farmers markets and all the current regulations that the Kansas Department of Agriculture does regulate those things. But if you have a flock of 50 or less hens, then there's not really a lot of regulations if you just want to sell directly to the consumer. So if I were taking my eggs to a farmer's market, there's really not a lot of regulations. They do recommend that you keep them cool at 45 degrees or cooler, but there's really no one that's going to regulate that. That's just a recommendation. Um, if you get above 50 hens, then you do have to get into some licensing restrictions, and it's $5 a year to get a license. So it's not too terribly expensive, but all that information is on the KDA website, and there's links to all that in this other publication that we will also put a link to. And you can sell other types of eggs. You can sell duck eggs and goose eggs. My geese do lay eggs. They do. Now, you can also cook with goose eggs. They're equal to two chicken eggs. Bet you didn't know that. There you go.
I was
Um,
just going to ask you about the conversion factor, so I love that you're one step ahead of me.
I am one step ahead of you. Now, have I tried my goose eggs? I have not tried them yet. Now, my significant other has, and he thinks they are fabulous. He really likes them, but I have not eaten them myself. So there's that.
I
Yeah.
would say I know duck eggs are known for being richer than like a
Yes.
chicken egg is. So I
Yes.
wonder where the geese eggs
I
fall
kind
on
of
that
think
spectrum.
it's the same way. He thinks they're delicious. Um, and Micah, you might have an opinion on this as well, as far as leaving your own eggs out on the counter, washing them, whatever. I leave mine out on the counter for the most part until I get them washed, and then I stick them in a carton, and then I might stick them in the fridge. But
I do too. But I am kind of a scared sometimes. So I float just about every egg before I eat it. So I don't know how scientifically true it is, but according to everything you see, putting that egg in a container of water that's obviously deeper, than the egg itself. And if it, floats to the top, it's not good. If
that
it
is,
stands up or, whatever, it's kind of, and so I feel like I do a lot of like, oh, I better check just to make sure. And even eggs that I have bought from the store, before I even cook them, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to float these because I don't really know where they've been or how old they are or, I mean, I think I would like to know off of the dates. But you just can't ever be too careful.
So no, you're absolutely right on the floating them. That is
Mhm.
absolutely 100% science based. So you can make sure your eggs are safe.
I'm
Um,
pretty
you
sure I
know,
saw that on like Facebook. So that's why I was like, I don't know how true this is, but I believe it.
so and honestly, that saved me from getting sick a time or two. Um, this is pre-marriage, pre-kid, so it wasn't my husband today, but another boyfriend. Was visiting his house, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the eggs are good." I'm like, I mean, the date was far enough out that it made me wonder. I'm like, which year are these dated? He's like, they're still on the shell, they're fine. Oh, let me tell you, those suckers, I dropped them, gravity took them down, and poof, right back up to the top. Like, we're not eating these. We're not eating these.
No.
So,
Being
yeah,
this time of year, though, if you have a bunch that float, that you don't want, you could save them for Easter eggs.
Yeah,
you know,
you can color them.
Yeah. Color them up, parboil them, color them up.
with the price of eggs, I can't even imagine using real
Oh,
eggs for Easter.
I
I
know.
Oh
I
I'm all
looked
yeah.
up
about the
prior to this, I did very quickly Google. So take this with a grain of salt. The price of eggs in 1925, tying that back, was 43 cents a dozen. And in 1955, because that was kind of more of an era I was talking about when my grandparents were around my age, which was post World War II, they were 53 cents a dozen. So it's quite the difference, between today's prices and then. But it also gives, there's an opportunity there if you can have some eggs or have some chickens to sell some eggs to, the people around you and make a little bit of money. And the people that are getting them from someone they know. And there's some value to that.
See, and I grew up with a mom who had an egg route every Saturday morning. And so she washed her eggs up before she delivered them. She didn't wash them until, just right before. I remember her laying them all out on towels for to dry and then packaging them. And we'd go to town and she'd drop off the dozens of eggs and, you know,
Hmm.
so and if you talk about some ladies, they'll talk about that their egg money saved them or their egg
Yeah.
money was what they bought back to school clothes with. And
And
So
it's a good opportunity for kids. I mean, chickens are pretty, easy within reason to take care of, good responsibility. It's not as much as, telling them go out and feed the cows or, something that maybe depending on your children's age is above their ability. But, with chickens, they can go and, gather the eggs and incubating is so much fun, in my opinion. We love to incubate chickens. We haven't done it for a couple years, but the kids, returning them and watching and waiting. And it was all so exciting, to them, and then hatching them and caring for them. It's all great, even for those young 4-Hers those clover buds, or the young 4-Hers, that are below that age of really getting into bigger livestock. It's just something they can start and learn that responsibility with.
So do you sell eggs, Micah? Do you sell any of yours?
No,
No. Yeah.
I
I ha
don't.
I haven't sold mine for a while. I took my excess ones to our local food bank this week because there's just 2 in my household, just me and my teenage daughter. And I had about 6 dozen extra because my hens are laying great right now. But I don't know if people know that they can do that. You can donate excess eggs to your local food bank. They will take those. And so that's what I did because people need them. And right now, our local grocery store is selling them for $6 a dozen. They can't afford that. People in need cannot afford that. So it's a great way to help out. So anyway, there's my little plug for the food bank.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it also, if you can have these chickens or have a few chickens, back on teaching the kids stuff, and tying back to the house, being a housewife, being, a homemaker type thing. You can do a lot of things with eggs, learning how to cook them safely, learning how to you can can eggs, learning
Mhm.
how, there's lots of different things that you can, what is that called? Ice bath or ice? There's a name for that with the canning the eggs. I've recently learned about it, but I need to research more. Um, you'll have to look that one up. I should have looked it up before this. I kind of forgot. There's a name for
Robin
it.
and I are both frowning at you because we've not heard that.
There's a
I
name
am
for
not
it.
sure that's a recommended method, but I will know here momentarily.
Yeah, look that one up. There's a name for it. Is it called? Oh, I want to say
Okay,
it's
well,
ice.
while Robin's looking that up, where do
Yes.
you usually get your chicks from?
Water glassing. That's what it's called. Look that one up, Robin. Sorry. I got my chickens from well, it was Orscheln's, but now it's
Oh, Baumgars.
Tractor Supply here. But
So local farm store.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, that's where I've gotten them. But I do, I know quite a few people now, which I got my chickens like 2 years ago. But now I know quite a few people that are raising
Mhm.
their own and selling chicks to people.
Yes. Yeah, there's a
Because
lot of
I think
different sources. Yes.
it's getting quite hard to find them.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you recommend? Would you recommend getting them from a farm store or would you recommend getting them from a local farm?
Oh, I think I would always recommend trying to support your fellow local farmers, but if you need to get them from a farm store, I think they're fine too.
Yeah.
Like I said, my chicken knowledge is not as good as it could be.
Yeah, I've done both myself. When you go to the farm store, you've usually got a choice of either pullets, which would be those that have been sexed, or the straight runs, which have not been sexed. So you could get a few roosters in there. I've done that before and gotten lots of roosters, which is not always desirable. Um, so you just kind of take your chances. But right now, they sell out fast. I mean,
Yes.
once they get chicks in, they're gone fast. I do have a local family that lives not far from me that they raise their own and they do sell a lot of chicks. And they also sell out fast. I mean, they'll start posting here on Facebook when they've got chicks in and they'll take pre-orders for them because these little babies are a hot commodity this year.
Yeah. And I find buying them younger, they are sometimes harder to keep alive. They're
Yes.
pretty fragile at that tiny, tiny age. So I kind of liked when they didn't quite sell out as fast and they would have them at Tractor Supply or wherever for a while. And then, they'd get to that age where they're like, we got to get rid of them, and they'd sell them for like $1. Those were the
Hmm.
ones that I like to get because you can pretty much keep those alive.
Right.
Like I said, I'm not the best chicken mother, so I can, and usually it was in the later in the year where it was a little bit warmer, closer to summer. not having to worry about that cold as much with those little tiny, tiny ones.
Yes. Yeah. So do you put when you have tiny ones, do you put them outside?
Yeah, so in my chicken house, I have an area where I have I guess a cage. I don't know what else to call it, for the little tiny, tiny babies. And I have an area where there's heat lamps, and I can, keep them warm, which is inside the big room where the chickens reside. And then they have a ramp to go out the window and they can go down into a run, which is actually just a dog pen that I repurposed into a chicken run. Um, so that my dogs do not mess with them and coyotes and anything else that might come through my yard, but they can still go outside and do their thing and eat when I don't have food in their feeder. So
Okay, so are you ready for the answers on water glassing?
yes, please, now I'm anxious to know.
Bottom line is extension does not recommend it as a preservation method.
I shouldn't have brought it up, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. This is one of those educational moments. So it's actually dates back to research done in 1945 and 48 when it was really popular and widely used. And what that shell is porous, and so it allows water and anything that's in the water to transfer through into your egg. And so it's not a safe method of keeping bacteria from transferring into your eggs. So water glassing is not a recommended preservation method by extension. But it does go on to say, with refrigerators and even freezing technologies, you can't freeze a whole egg, but you can beat up and then freeze the egg as a beaten egg, if that makes sense, to maintain it. So anyway, that's the answer on that.
Good to know. Good to know about that.
Well, we certainly have recommendations for pickling eggs, if that's your cup of tea, if you like pickled eggs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like pickled. I also have a garden, so I love anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I love that you say that, Jody, because then the next bullet point was that there are no approved canning recipes for pickled eggs for actual canning and storing at room temperature, and that's from the National Center for Home Food Preservation. So if you were to pickle eggs, it would need to be a refrigerated product,
Yeah.
not one that's stored on the shelf.
Correct.
And actually canned.
Yeah. Thanks for helping.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
I always love bringing the research that seems to put the kibosh on everybody's great ideas.
That's okay. I've never tried the water glassing. I just saw it on TikTok.
Well, I do not like pickled eggs, so I've never actually made pickled eggs. So there you go.
So I actually do love pickled eggs, and there are ones you can buy in stores that are commercially produced, which is a different method than home canning. But you can make them at home. You just have to store them in the refrigerator. You cannot actually can them and preserve them. So,
okay. All right. Well, back to chicks. I'm a weird lady who actually brings her chicks in the house, and my daughter really likes them, so she brings them into her bedroom and lets the little baby chicks cheep, cheep, cheep at her all night. I don't know how she stands it. That would drive me absolutely nuts. But yeah, Carrie likes to have them in her room. Well, that way the cat doesn't get them. And, so they hang out in the house until they're old enough to go outside, and then we shove them out into the big house. So I haven't had baby chicks though since I've gotten geese. So we're going to find out here in a few weeks because I'm getting some from a producer, not from the store. We're getting some baby chicks. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay, I joke about poultry princesses, but sleeping in your daughter's bedroom raises it to a whole nother level of poultry princess.
Whole other level of crazy, doesn't it?
Yep.
Not just a crazy cat lady. I'm also a crazy chicken lady. Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit about feed. What all do you feed your what do you put in that big cell feeder?
I buy my chicken feed from the local farm store. And I would like to say that I don't pick the cheapest bag that I can find, but there are times I do. Um, but I have recently started feeding the bigger pellets compared to the scratch feed. My brother was the idea behind that, to help him with some egg things. So, like I said, my chicken knowledge, you know, I'm on the lower side of the chicken knowledge. I scrape by. So that's where I get my feed from.
That's funny you said that because I recently switched to some of the bigger pellets too. I kind of mixed it in with the smaller scratchy grain on the recommendation of a grain guy up north. Um, and I don't know that it's maybe it has helped the egg production. I don't know, but I recently did that switch too. So that's interesting that you said that.
I also feed my chickens a lot of scraps. Like, I don't know, I
Yeah,
killed potatoes a couple days ago and
yeah,
I
I do
gave them
too.
all that.
Yeah, they are
If I
great
have
little
a
garbage
jar of
disposals.
vegetable pickles or something that goes bad, they'll eat it right up. I mean, not that it really goes bad. I don't necessarily give them things that go bad, but if it's out of date, um, they'll eat anything.
They do. For sure. And if you've got free ranging chickens, I think you'll notice a decrease in like grasshoppers and mosquitoes, and they're great at bugs. They love to eat bugs.
Yes, my chickens last summer when we had a time when the grasshoppers were just nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And my chickens were they would my chicken house and the run is next to my garden, which is fenced, but the grasshoppers at that time were trying to get into my garden, so they were very close. And the chickens, when we would walk out there, they would hear us coming and they would be right at the edge of their run, ready to grab any grasshopper that jumped their way. They were all about the grasshoppers.
Yes, and they would follow me on the lawnmower. Yes.
I bet. Yeah, they were all about it. And I've heard, um, with other types of birds like guineas, if you run guineas with your chickens, they're supposed to keep snakes out of your yard. I don't know how true that is, but they're supposed to be good with bugs and things too. There's all, you can add any kind of bird in there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I said I do not clean out my chicken house on a daily basis. I do not. I do, however, clean mine out. Um, Oh, I tried to do it weekly, but that's kind of gotten lax lately too. But when I do clean it out, I do give the I do give my little princesses fresh hay in their nesting boxes, and I do make a nest for the geese. Um, what are some practices you do when you get get to cleaning out your chicken house? Because
Yes, I don't.
surely you do that
Yes, not
occasionally.
not quite as often, but it
No
does build up.
judgment.
It does build up,
Yeah.
significantly at times. You have to clean it out. It's something that just has to be done.
Mhm.
Um, but I also put all of this things I clean out of my chicken house, not all of it, but I put some on my garden. And then when I go to till my garden, work that in. So that's kind of a double
Mhm.
there. But
Yep.
yeah, I have a nesting box that I put straw in. My floor of my chicken house is concrete. And so sometimes I might put shavings down or sand or something that I don't have a pattern there. I just, whatever I've got, I throw it
Yep.
down for them.
Yep. That helps. That definitely helps. Um, any other recommendations you might have for people wanting to get into starting their own little flock?
I think the biggest thing to me is you can kind of make it whatever you want out of chickens. They're pretty versatile and you can kind of, you can do it a better way like you do and take care of them a little better. Or if maybe somebody doesn't have, thinks maybe they don't have the time or something, you can still probably raise chickens, even if you think, I would never have time for that. They're not a big they don't have to be a big time consumer, but they are a good source of fresh food and homegrown food. And if you want to get into the meat chicken side, I have never, my grandma, that we've spoken about, she grew up about 3 miles from here and she had a chicken house and it's still there and it's quite large. And I believe she said it was my great grandpa and then her grandpa, so my great great grandpa. They laid her a concrete floor in her chicken house and she was big time back then. That was not something that people really had. And so she would buy like 200 chickens a year and take half of them and butcher them and keep the other half for eggs. And then I think, it kind of varied year to year, but that was about a normal year for her. She had quite the chicken herd and she spent a lot of time butchering chickens. And that was something that I wish, looking back now that she's gone, of course, I wish that I would have learned that skill. But we had chickens then, but we didn't butcher any of them. But I wish that was a skill that I would have learned, from her, which I could still probably learn that, if I wanted to get into the meat chicken side. But I think maybe I might just want to buy it. I might just buy my meat from somebody else that does it.
So I grew up butchering chickens, and it is, yeah, it's a process and it's eventful, that's for sure. And I'm going to leave it at that because it can also seem a little bit gross if you, yeah.
There is a farm in Pratt County, and I can put a link to their Facebook page. It's called 5 Acre Farm, and they raise chicks and they sell them. They also do butchering workshops as well, because they raise meat chickens, and they'll teach people how to butcher your own chickens as well, if that's something you want to learn how to do. But they're a really nice couple, and it's very informative.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah,
And that's
there's
not my
lots of
cup
ways to
tea,
do it.
because I can't name my chickens and then go kill them. I just, yeah, I just can't.
Your meat birds you can't name, dear. That's the only way it works.
Mine are for egg laying purposes only.
And that's another point. There's a wide variety of chickens that you can get. I
Yes.
don't know how many breeds of chickens that are just, more egg chickens. And then there's some that are meat and egg layers. And then there's meat chickens. And
Mm.
I don't know what the range there is, but there is a lot of different types of chickens that you could have your wildest dreams.
Yes, and that first publication that I talked about from K-State, we'll talk about some of those different breeds and which are best for laying, which are best for meat purposes. And yeah, I certainly buy the ones that are best for laying, because I know darn good and well I could not butcher my pets and eat them. Now, do I eat chicken? Yeah, I do, but I didn't just go kill it either. So I'm kind of weird like that.
You didn't watch it grow up and name it first. Yes, I get you,
Exactly.
Jody. The one thing I would like to add here is because I live inside of a town, and so you can,
Mm,
in most cities, have chickens, but your backyard flock is limited. So just before you jump off and anybody would start a chicken, um, for we're gonna stay with the egg laying, but for eggs, just to make sure you know what your city's regulations are.
right. And most usually you can have hens and not roosters within the city limits, just
That
because of the noise factor.
tends to be, but each city can set their own rules. So I just want to encourage
Yeah.
people to know what they're doing so that they can stay with inside the city guidelines too.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yep. Yep. Okay. I I don't have any other nuggets of chicky wisdom. Oh, I do have one more nugget of chicky wisdom. And Micah, you might also know this little nugget of chicky wisdom. When you're putting your eggs in their egg cartons, you should put the smaller end in first. I got that from that egg workshop I went to.
I did not know that one.
Yeah. Mhm.
I've learned
Yep.
all kinds of chicken facts today.
See, there you go.
Jody, did you know intentionally you're talking about chicken nugget wisdom there?
Chicken nugget.
I
Okay,
did.
sorry. I about
Yeah.
lost it on. Sorry. Micah, I know we talked about so many more things you could talk about. You want to come back and visit with us another day?
Absolutely. I would love to.
I
That'd be
think we
great.
need to.
I think
Yeah.
so too.
I kind of live a wide variety, like we were talking about the wide variety of chicken breeds. I live a wide variety of things. I have a lot of irons in the fire. So, like I said, my chicken knowledge may be a little limited. I primarily do the cattle side of things, but you know, it all ties in together, living the farm life. So, yeah, anytime I would love to. I've spent a lot of years in 4-H, a lot of different projects, a lot of different aspects of that. So, anytime you guys want someone that has some kind of background in something, we could probably find it.
Love that. Thank you.
Okay, Jody, you want to wrap us up where how people can find us?
I would love to. So you can always email us. You can email Robin at reubank@ksu.edu. You can email me at jdrake@ksu.edu. You can find our podcast on Apple and Spotify. You can find me on YouTube at Pratt County Extension. I'm on Instagram at Pratt CO Extension and on Facebook. Barber County Extension's on Facebook and Pratt CO Extension is on Facebook. I think that does it.
Did it excellent. That's the reason we
That's why
have
you
you
keep
do
me
that.
around.
So, well, thank you all. This was a fun topic to talk about today,
One
and
of my favorites. I should have brought Little Red Hen with me. That would have been fun.
ah,
Thank you guys for having me today.
If you go to my TikTok, all I have are goose release the geese videos. That's it.
I'll have to go look that one up
Yeah,
after.
that's it. Just mornings of release the geese. Yeah.
Quickly on that subject before we end, thinking of that, I had chickens growing up. And every morning we had this rooster. I was probably in high school. He was the meanest thing. But he would, every single morning, I would open that chicken door and he would come out at me. And I had a 2x4 that I used to prop the door open. And I would take a swing, miss every time. I'd miss and he would run off and he would leave me alone. And that was our morning routine. He would come at me, I would swing at him, he would get away. And that was our chicken letting out every morning of my high school career.
Love that. I have to have a broom with me to keep Desi, my goose, from coming after me. So yeah, he sees the broom and he doesn't come. So yeah.
you just seize the broom.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, I
Excitement.
love
See,
you. I love you, ladies, and your stories. This has been a great episode. So, Micah, thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for the Special Agent Moms podcast.
woohoo. Thanks, Micah.
Yeah, thank you guys.